Hello, everybody. This is Ori B from Hoop Social. I am your host of the Creator Hour. This is an hour in which we like to take our favorite NBA content creators, have conversations with them, learn why they do what they do, and hopefully learn a little bit about the NBA and their opinions as well. Today's guest is a fun guy, a guy that I know is very intelligent when it comes to the NBA, a guy that appreciates the history of the NBA, which is something that I usually use as kind of a litmus test as to whether or not I can appreciate your content. So this guy definitely passes that test. We may get to some of the top 100 stuff today as well. That has come out by ESPN. That has been extraordinarily polarizing, driving people absolutely up a wall. So maybe we'll touch on that a little bit as well. But this is the Creator Hour, episode 2. Let's go.
Get your popcorn ready, it's a show you can't miss. Welcome to the Creator Hour, where legends reminisce.
All right, so we're going to start with episode 2. Have a great guest today. My guy is Juelz from the Hoopstorians. If you don't watch the Hoopstorians, it's a show that we have on the Sports Fluent Network as well. Excellent content. Those guys really appreciate history and have had some fun guests. Juelz, come on down, man. Let's get you up here so we can have a conversation.
What's up, Ori? How are you, man?
I'm doing really well, man. I appreciate you doing this. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thank you for doing this. This is awesome. I'm kind of ecstatic to do this. This is kind of my first kind of interview doing with anybody before, so I appreciate the what you're doing. I love this kind of stuff.
Cool, man. Not a problem. This is exactly what I love as well. I like getting to know content creators and why they tick. And you are a high quality content creator and clearly have a grasp of the NBA, which I can appreciate. So good stuff, man.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I do. Yeah, I try to do the kind of the historical stuff like you said, because I think it's extremely important to talk about when we have these discussions, and it kind of drives me up the wall with all of these people who don't appreciate the free merger stuff. It just I don't understand it.
Now, not to get down like too big of a rabbit hole, because I know we could probably talk about that issue all day. But
Right.
Before we get into you, what do you think it is that makes it difficult for people to research and respect some of that pre-merger stuff?
So that's interesting, and that's what I try to ask everybody when I talk to them, because I understand the kind of generational gap of I'm obviously of the younger side, so it's not necessarily something that I go through, but I just like other people who create content, I think that the fan base is lazy and they don't like doing their homework, and it's obnoxious when I have to have these conversations, and I just don't understand why people kind of do this kind of stuff, because in being a fan with everything else, I've never seen or taken part of these kind of discussions to where it's like, okay, well, these guys are plumbers, and the fact that these guys are being able to revolutionize what we have today, the outlet pass, the fast break, being able to identify defensive schemes from a very simplistic level that are still being used today. And people just don't necessarily understand that. And it just, again, it drives me up a wall, because I don't know what the disconnect is, talking about from its infancy to now where we are today, of being able to run these very complex offenses and defenses. So it becomes of being able to understand the fundamentals.
Yeah, exactly. The understanding of where the game came from, to me, I found important, especially as some would call a nerd for the game. But the disconnect is palpable between Gen Z and even those in the millennial generation, where I believe you're right. The term casual gets thrown around maybe a little bit too much in NBA TikTok, But sometimes I think that it can hold some weight in the sense that there are these people that just don't want to dive any deeper than they have to. 20 years is as much of the NBA as they need, and what happened in those 20 years is all they need to continue. So I disagree with that thought process, but you seem to see it quite a bit. So it is kind of a sad state sometimes of NBA TikTok.
Yeah, it really is. And to be honest with you, because I guess I'm viewed as like a newbie because I've only been doing this for about a year. And having to talk to the people who are a little bit younger than myself, they all come from at basically everything post 2000, or really everything post 1980 since the merger. And it's like, okay, we can't rank, or we can't talk about these people who are, transcending the game. Jerry, Bill, Bob Cousy, Bill Sharman, Frank Ramsey, Bob Davies, the list goes on. And it's like, what I always equated to, because the reason why I'm a historian from the basketball sense is that when I was going to school pre-COVID, I wanted to be a historian. And unironically, I grew up in the Philadelphia area, and where I went to school was right outside of Overbrook. And if basketball people know, that's where Wilt, that was his backyard. So a lot of what I was able to do in my free time was go out into Overbrook society and community and ask about, the stories of Wilt, what he was doing at these parks, and being able to be a part of the community as is. And it's very tangible. Now, granted, it's word of mouth, but it still adds to the legend of Wilt Chamberlain and what he was doing at Overbrook. So I find that very palpable to me, being able to hear these guys talk about Wilt Chamberlain and what he was doing at that time.
Well, that's a perfect segue. I appreciate you doing that for me, because now that leads me to the next question, which you kind of answered a little bit, but I like to ask everybody, generally first, what is it that brought you to the NBA and your fandom? So what are some of the defining moments for your fandom when it comes to the growth and evolution of, who you are today?
So, what's funny is that basketball wasn't necessarily something that I tangibly watched growing up. I was a big football guy. I played football up until high school, and here and there I would watch basketball up until 2008. And the very first series I watched was your Celtics and the Lakers in that infamous NBA Finals. And then it's actually why a big reason that Kevin Garnett is one of my favorite players. But anyways, being able to watch that and see the passion on both sides, regardless of winning or losing. Kevin Garnett with his, infamous lines, Kobe Bryant during that series, you just having to see him push it all the way to the brim, bringing that historic Celtics team to the brink. Seeing Ray Allen there, Paul Pierce, Pau Gasol, all these kind of guys, to where it made it seem very tangible to me, and wanting to watch and be able to be a part of the community. And then I was sporadically watching over the next several years. And because, again, being from Philadelphia, I had the Sixers as my regional team. But as we know, during that time, we were winning 9 games. So it wasn't really a fun watch.
Before the process, yes.
Yeah, literally, yeah. The leading to the process, Michael Carter-Williams, Nolan Will, Jakar Sampson, old Jason Richardson. It was just a bad watch.
Man, that's a team that I'm sure a lot of people love to forget. Philadelphia guy later on. So we do have to talk briefly. The process, failure, success.
So I think it was somewhat of a success, and I don't think everybody necessarily understands why Sam Hinkie was doing the stuff that he did, because I do think it was ultimately to a bigger goal of that. Yes, the process was trying to lead to a championship, and obviously that wasn't the end. But I think he was able to find almost a loophole in the draft lottery, because the Sixers infamously was getting, top 3 picks. Now, granted, they were dumb drafting, the people that they did, or trading away in picks to you guys to get Jason Tatum, which, that's a different story.
I mean, that's not the worst trade in NBA history or anything. I mean, come
on. But I do think that Sam Hinkie was able to understand kind of where the draft goes, and now since literally I call it the Sam Hinkie rule. It's like teams can't go out and say we're going to win 9 games, we're going to win 15 games, we're just going to get the best guys out of either Kentucky or Duke or UNC, and we'll go from there. So I think it was somewhat of a success, but you just kind of have to put a different lens behind it when we talk about the process in general.
That's fair. That's fair. And, I'm going to take that and use that as another segue. Process. That's important when you're a content creator. What was the process of going from fan to somebody that wanted to become like an educator? What made you make that jump?
You know what's funny? So when I started like doing some content on TikTok, obviously we're all in people's comment sections. We get your For You pages and stuff like that. And unironically, the guest that was prior to me, Kev, one of the first guys that I was able to see. And I'm a good friend of his as well, and Kev and I go back and forth, and he lets me up, and I talk with him when he goes live as well. But I don't know if he remembers, but I know that he's a big Dirk over KG guy, and I personally disagree. And one of his posts was kind of explaining why Dirk is over KG, and I think it was before they had like character limits in the comment section, if you remember. I said like 4 paragraphs of stuff, like having to end a comment, add a new one, go through of why KG is over Dirk and all this kind of stuff. And unironically, within his mutuals and stuff like that, he got to talking with me, and again, we disagree on that kind of stuff. But then that kind of gave me an understanding of like, well, I don't have to be a keyboard warrior. I can use my voice and kind of explain why I have places people over people and have these discussions with people at the end of the day. Because I think again, history needs to be talked about, and people just don't like talking about history whatsoever. They're lazy. So yeah. I decided to have that voice.
Well, sadly, it's a state of, I think, the country and, NBA in certain categories like that, where people just tend to be satisfied with ignorance, I suppose, maybe is the best way to put it.
Yeah.
That tends to drive me nuts, because I'm never satisfied. I always want to know more and feel that learning more is just always the way to go, I've always said that my lists, I don't usually do rankings full blown, but when I tend to put them together, I always give the piece that this is going to be something that is pretty fluid, because I'm always researching, I'm always learning more. And as someone that's open to changing their mind when presented with new information, the lists have to be fluid for me. That being said, I know you're a guy that ranks players and likes to get into those conversations, which kudos to you. That's difficult for me sometimes, because I just have a hard time. I have a pyramid, which is how I rank people. I use context, I use statistics, and then finally I use the eye test. And those 3 I put together to kind of formulate at least a criteria when judging players versus one another. When you put together a list and it's something that you want to share with people, what kind of criteria do you tend to use more than most? Or what is your criteria in general?
So usually the criteria of what I try to do is the peaks of people what they do in their prime, so their quality years, how they are in the regular season, how they translate in the playoffs, how they impact their team in general, and how they impact their the way of how we see the game. Can we make a story out of what they are doing? Because if we are in the NBA history, we have to have a fluent story. And when that story, if your name can unironically be kind of left out or be not as important, that's when, to me, is where your legacy or your impact is a little bit less than somebody else's. So I try not to use like media bias, and it's very tricky when it comes to the media, but I do think sometimes they're on point what they're talking about, but obviously the media has their biases itself, so we can't use them in general. But being able to understand at least where they're coming from and then use it as your streamlight, again, doing your own research, doing the things that you do, and then you have your criteria to spew what we want to talk about in these discussions that we have.
Yeah, that's solid. That's solid. So that's got to be difficult when on a place like NBA TikTok, where the discourse can, as we know, become sharply toxic very quickly.
Yeah.
The ad hominem attacks, the personality, we're going to go after you for this or call you a stan or a casual, or we all know the lingo by now if you've been in there long enough. A year is plenty long enough to know all the lingo.
Yeah, I agree.
How do you view the community in general, though, as someone that looks to educate first, which I appreciate more than most? How do you find are the best ways to either make your points or how to get your points across through NBA TikTok?
That's actually a really good question. I think the best ways to kind of come about things is, okay, coming at its core of, okay, who the player really is and what they're known for, and then add to the pyramid of what they're doing. And what I found, ironically, rather recently, is having to go watch again they're the playoffs, and that's why I value playoff translation, because unironically, a lot of these broadcasters, these media guys who are calling the games, have these kind of side stories during these games that people don't pick up on. For example, I was having to do more of a deeper dive of Jason Kidd. And I was doing a whole bunch of like point guard stuff recently because this whole Chris Paul versus Kyrie Irving argument, right? But for a little bit prior to, I was doing the Jason Kidd stuff, and they're talking about some certain aspects about Jason Kidd, being a defensive anchor for the Nets, and how Kenyon Martin and Tim Duncan talks are somewhat real. And it's how weird the memory is when we talk about times in NBA history where these discussions were happening. And that's when we kind of talk about this stuff, it's like, why do we leave out the nuanced details that would, promote an argument, or just be completely left out because we go by media narratives? And it's like, this is why I vitalize everybody to do their own homework, because at the end of the day, if you see something that is very nuanced and you understand that, you can use that then as either a talking point or an argument when we talk about these players in general.
Yeah, that's very valid. That's a good way of looking at things. I appreciate that perspective, because this whole avenue, NBA TikTok, the audience, what have you, tends to, in my opinion, run away from some of those things that we're able to talk about. And it's always easier to make the recent argument as opposed to the real argument. There's not a lot of subjectivity necessarily. And that's or there's too much subjectivity, I should say, in a sport like this, where, you know, I think the GOAT debate has kind of ruined things. I know that you see that a lot, and I have absolutely no problem comparing players. I understand that it's a fun thing, you know, playing out certain hypotheticals, playing different, like how this guy versus this guy could match up, who did better, stats.
Mm-hmm.
I love all of that. Absolutely. I despise the GOAT debate, though, because I think it's tainted everybody in a certain way and makes people kind of argue in a certain way. And I'm just curious, how much has the GOAT debate affected your TikTok life?
Oh God, Ori, where do I begin with this stuff? So I was having this kind of discussion last night. Is that unironically, I don't partake in any of that kind of stuff. Like, or at least I try not to. The only times in which I try to be in these discussions is when I hear something that's, you know, completely blasphemous or wrong, and try to correct them, because that's, you know, that's not historically accurate. That's just fading into the media bias or the falseness that it comes to that kind of debate. But I try to steer away from that as much as possible, because again, I don't think that debate will ever be solved, because you're either on one side of the fence or the other, and that's what you preference. What I try to gear my content and my discussions towards are the people that don't get talked about enough. Like, I unironically believe that players who are within the top 10, like a Magic or a Bird, are like a nuanced argument now, and we all predicate them to, you know, saving the NBA, and nobody talks about them unless they're like, oh well, they're playing in the 80s, they're plumbers, which obviously both know that's blasphemous. But nobody kind of talks about them as much, because it's like it's MJ or Jordan, or now the Kobe argument as well. So it's the nuanced kind of stuff to where I find the most kind of appreciation towards, of trying to talk about the NBA, because people have their opinions on these nuanced players, and they are also falsely misinformed as well. So it's something that I try to keep in track, at least to where the MJ and Braun guys say, go do your thing. I will partake in that as much as possible.
Yeah, and I've got a couple buddies that I follow that partake in that consistently. Good for them. I respect them tremendously for being able to have those conversations as often as they do. But you're right. Foundationally, there are just so many things in the NBA to dive deeper into. So many storylines, so many narratives, so many fun players, so many forgotten players that fall by the wayside because we do focus a little bit too much on this. And so I think as content creators that want to educate, it's our goal and our way to try to produce content that makes people think about these guys again. And so I appreciate you being somebody that values what others did in order to get to where we are now. You know that we stand on the shoulders of giants, and you want to know about the giants. I think that is tremendously valuable as a person. So good for you. Kudos for that also. More about you. I'm curious, that rookies in the NBA have it, but us NBA content creators have it as well, especially guys of us that are NBA fans. What was your I love this game moment? You mentioned coming into it around 2008. So what was your, you know what? I'm sold. This is for me. What was your moment?
You know, so I've been actually talking about this a lot recently. One of my favorite players of all time is LaMarcus Aldridge. And what the series that I think unironically gets brought up, and it's not for him, I believe it's that 2014 or 2015 series against Houston. And everybody remembers that because it's the original Dame Time, shot, the clutch shot over Chandler Parsons off the screen on the top of the key. And like everybody forgets, in the first two games of the series, LaMarcus Aldridge is putting up 46 and 45 points of just completely destroying Amir Ashik. Like that, the low post, the mid post face-up game that LaMarcus is doing, and being able to get to his spots, and the Rockets just have no answer for LaMarcus because Dwight Howard he has a bad back at the time. And he can't go out on the mid post because he's being asked as being the main rim deterrent for the Rockets. So LaMarcus Aldridge is just eating away at that defense night in and night out, and there's just nobody to get at him. Now, granted, Dwight Howard has a really, really good series too because Robin Lopez can't do anything on the back end. But that's where I fall into this kind of the nuance, is that when we talk about players in general, LaMarcus Aldridge is definitely like one of the best players of all time, in my opinion. But it's like that the mid post to mid range game, being able to face up, create your own shot in a very unorthodox kind of way, towards like my eye test would tell me he's a all time great player. Now the stats don't back that up, so that's why I think eye test should probably be at the lower end of people's criterias, because that's subjective and that's not objective. But I think that's when I started to be like, okay, yeah, this is the type of this is where the basketball game kind of comes to me, to where I enjoy this kind of stuff, because that it's just, sporadic offense that is unorthodox.
Yeah, I really like the LaMarcus Aldridge shout out, first and foremost. A guy that I always thought never quite reached his ceiling for reasons that weren't necessarily within his control. Some of those teams, those Portland teams, the Aldridge, Roy, Odin team that they talk about, that was like 50 and 12 together, I believe, in games they played together, which just is sadly a testament to the bad luck that's followed the Portland Trailblazers their entire existence. Figuring they missed on Sam Bowie, they had Bill Walton, Brandon Roy. I feel bad for the Trailblazers as an organization. LaMarcus Aldridge, to me, though, that's a curious guy. Without going too far off topic, is he a Hall of Famer to you?
Probably, but probably not first ballot.
Okay, that's fair. So you do see him as kind of one of those borderline types that probably deserves to have his name in there because of what he's done, but he's not first tier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think he's one of those guys that will probably get in on their like third time on the ballot, but he's definitely a Hall of Famer, because I do think, ironically, the big men during the transition from 08 to like 15 or 16 is probably one of the weaker ones in NBA history, and I think LaMarcus is just one of the ones that kind of stood out to me during that time. So I think, even though it's a bad era, I do think that he's one of the better ones.
Yeah, honestly, that's not a hard case to make, I imagine. Just thinking about it off the top of my head, I know Aldridge was consistent, was a high-quality scorer, and underrated by most parties. So, yeah, I feel like that's definitely one of those things where if you really started going through the big man list, you'll realize, number one, how ridiculously short it is during that time period. But
right.
number two, LaMarcus Aldridge is definitely on it. So that's cool. That's a nice pull. I like that. Now, team-wise, you mentioned Philadelphia being where you were from, but I do see you in a Spurs jersey. So you got to explain to me, are you one of those guys that likes the NBA and just follows the players, or deep down, do you got kind of like a team that you kind of go for?
So it's unironic. Again, being from Philly, those teams were just a really, really hard to watch. But my favorite player on that team during the time period is Nerlens Noel. His flat top, I don't know, something about that flat top
I
move.
love it.
But so when I started to like physically try to dissect what was happening and being able to obtain this, what these offenses were doing during the time period, was 2014, and the San Antonio Spurs 2014 run is, I think, one of, ironically, when you think about basketball, ball movement, being able to bring everybody in motion, sharing the ball, creating a great, not good, great shot. That Spurs team is what I think about. And that's where I was being able to dissect and understand where on a basis level of how basketball should be played. But the Spurs weren't necessarily my first favorite team. My mother's side of the family is all from Seattle, and like I mentioned, '08 was the first year in which I was, starting to understand, and the Sonics were still a thing. So I'm like, okay, there's this guy who's grown to be 7 feet tall of Kevin Durant in this green jersey from the Emerald City, and it's gone.
Yeah.
So because the Sonics weren't necessarily there, even being from Philly, I didn't know kind of where to go. So for years, I was kind of navigating of where to be. And Brett Brown came from the Spurs. So I'm like, okay, I don't know much about the Spurs. They're a low team. They're a low tier team in terms of market. And then I got to see how they played, and I'm like, this is poetry in motion. So that's where like my history started to kind of go down, what the Spurs were when they were in the ABA, what they turned into the early '80s Spurs. Shout out to the early '80s Spurs, and kind of see what they go. So it's just something that it was kind of nuanced to where I just kind of fell in love with the gray and black.
I love that. And here goes the quick pressure question. George Gervin, where is he on that shooting guard list? Is he top 5 or is he out of the top 5?
He's 5.
He's 5. Ooh, okay. I love it.
So I've been doing that kind of deep dive. Actually, more recently, having a couple projects, and I evaluate what George Gervin was being able to do from the ABA, giving you scoring titles and basically one of the better teams in the ABA, and then transitioning to one of the only players. He did have a scoring drop, but it wasn't nearly as drastic as everybody else. He's one of the only people to really maintain his value of being a high volume shooter, and getting to his spots. And watching the 1983 Spurs team, George Gervin basically close to a scoring title, giving you almost 30 points a game. Mike Mitchell is giving you 23 and 7 and 4. My new favorite player, if you've heard me say it, Johnny Moore in the playoffs, is giving you 27 and 14 against a high-powered Denver Nuggets team, and then giving you 20 and 15 against the Lakers in the Western Conference Finals. Basically, and he has a real argument of being equally as valuable as Magic. Now, granted, Magic's giving you a triple-double, but 6'9" to 6'2", so I can give. And then Artis Gilmore. Everybody forgets Artis Gilmore was a Spur, and unironically, like I don't use the term super teams. I joke around with that more than giving us some serious validity. But that was actually one of the first teams I got to see to where it's like if there's accumulation of talent there, they're making Western Conference Finals, multiple times in a row, and they're on par with offenses with the primetime Lakers, and they're in arguments, they're outpacing them. The reason why they lose is because they just don't have any perimeter defenders like the Lakers have.
Yeah, which ends up being such a big deal in that time period. That's why you see a lot of these perimeter defenders, that's why Michael Cooper made the Hall of Fame. let's be serious. Is just because those perimeter defenders were valuable and a little bit farther in between because of how important rim protector was in that day and age. I mean, arguably for most of basketball history, I'm sure you agree, rim protector was the most important defensive aspect, or at least one of the most important defensive aspects, was having somebody that just flat out clogged up the post and could defend like that. But yeah, that's interesting you talk about the 80s Spurs, because I think because of the success of the 2000s Spurs, a lot of people tend to forget those George Gervin-led squads that were certainly interesting, especially offensively. Gervin, the Iceman, was that finger roll, man. You watch that. That is sensational. Every time I see it, I'm just like, that guy, like, why is he even shooting it like that? I don't know, but it is so beautiful when it goes in.
Yeah, no, it actually kind of gives me chills because I think he's underrated because he legitimately has a jump shot. Like watching these series, they're running curl pin down screens for him and from 17 feet out, and he's swishing all of them. Now we think about George Gervin for the finger roll as we should, but he's a legitimate mid-range shooter that is an underrated value for his game. And again, his wingmate Mike Mitchell is doing the same exact thing with a Byron Scott and a Michael Cooper on him. So that's when I talk about, going into these forgotten teams and watching and being able to listen what these people are saying, because I can push some nasty agendas about those 80 Spurs being up there with the Lakers, but I'll wait on that.
Well, I'll prepare myself for the Showtime Lakers are not as good as the 80s Spurs. We'll see how that goes. I'll root for you, no worries. It's interesting to me because San Antonio now is so traditionally just Popovich, Duncan is, the biggest pieces in their history, which I understand. They got the titles. I'm not being ignorant. What were some of your favorite moments once you kind of became a Spurs fan? You mentioned the 2014 team as being probably one of the best teams to ever exist, which I would agree with that sentiment. I think that they are probably the best in the last 25 years definition of a true team playing the ball that we all just drool over as NBA fans.
Mm-hmm.
Was there a particular player, maybe Tim Duncan, maybe not a big three guy, that you fell in love with as well?
So it's weird because my favorite player of all time, because I have shared the same birthday as him, and now it's unfortunate because of the circumstances, is a Kawhi Leonard. And what Kawhi, this and I had to deep dive into this and being able to see what he was doing, because we all a testament that 2014 defensive series to Kawhi. And when we look at the box score numbers, right, if we're just doing, very vaguely, it kind of looks like Kawhi didn't do much because LeBron is still putting up LeBron-esque numbers. But going back and watching that series, and not only that series, but in 2013, Greg Popovich is tasking a second-year player out of San Diego State to go against the best player in his prime.
Yeah.
And that is where I think the testament of Greg Popovich is really kind of undervalued, because even though to backpedal a little bit, in 99, the Spurs series and Ewing isn't there, he's tasking a second-year player to manage the offensive load. So the amount of trust of what a coach is tasking his players to do in year, 2 minimum is a lot. And it's kind of sink or swim with Greg Popovich. And I think that what I was able to attest to Kawhi, even though the conversation was he a role player? Was he a key sentiment to the starting lineup and all this kind of stuff? is more where like these role players during that team success for San Antonio is being outlaid into this grand scheme of things, and where people kind of vastly overvalue the roster construction of San Antonio, because people talk about, well, Tim Duncan had loaded teams. I just don't think so.
Yeah.
And that's just not me trying to be biased or anything, but go and look at what Greg is tasking these guys to do. What I will say is that pre-05, Greg is running just like kind of routine post ups with Tim Duncan, and when D-Rob was there. So it's just very, boring kind of basketball. And when he implements this motion offense, that's where, and he finally gets these guys, you're seeing beautiful basketball. And we're seeing people like a Boris Diaw be able to be utilized as a key piece into a championship team, a Matt Bonner, a Danny Green, these key role guys that you're just like, they weren't doing this anywhere else.
Yeah, that's so true. That environment definitely bred a certain type of character within the players, for sure, which I think is important, because those are the type of pieces where I know a lot of people want to have those arguments. The Belichick over Brady, is it Popovich? Is it Duncan? Who led to the culture of San Antonio in the 2000s? And to be frank, it doesn't necessarily matter to me who led them to that point. The fact that they're at that point, I think, is a testament to both of them. And Popovich is still maintaining as best he can that environment for as long as possible, especially while they have a guy like Wemby. They want to keep this, that winning culture, give it a chance to come back. What are your thoughts on the San Antonio Spurs moving forward?
Watch out. If we're seeing in the off season that a taller version of Kevin Durant is working out with a Kevin Garnett, with like a Hakeem Olajuwon, with a Jay crossover, and going with Shaolin monks, it's gonna be nightmares. But in all seriousness, they're a young team, and they just kind of need to learn the kinks of what they really need to do. Carter Bryant coming into the system, I think, is a very not talked about piece enough, and I do a couple videos on him. What he was doing in Summer League, I think is diabolical. So shout out to Carter Bryant. Hopefully he does really good for us. Dylan Harper's obviously a stouted pick, one of the better ones coming out of the draft. But again, it's just a young core to where the West is so deep that I think it might take a year or two, but San Antonio should be one of these teams going forward that the NBA is already kind of pushing to be on par with the Thunder of all teams, because they have them as one of the Christmas Day games and key marquee matchups, because they already know that they were already pushing Chet versus Wemby. Now, could it be, Harper versus Shea? Could it be Carter versus J-Dub? And I think where I can, give my roses to Adam Silver is being able to understand that and be able to start it now and work its way organically to the future.
I mean, too bad we can't watch the games, because it's a highlight sports, and we need to watch them on YouTube because nobody can pay for streaming services, I guess. Whatever point he was trying to make there was strange, but yeah, for sure. I think that this is important for the San Antonio Spurs to get somebody like Wemby, who is clearly phenomenal as a player and very hard to describe. He reminds me of one of those cheat codes. They always say, like a cheat code on my team or my NBA, where it's like, you're not allowed to put him that tall and then put his 3-point shot up that high. You're not allowed to do those things at the same time. and he's only going to get better. He's fascinating to me, fascinating. And with De'Aaron Fox and the pieces there, I mean, this may sound like hyperbole, but to me, a San Antonio versus OKC rivalry could be something that could brew.
Yeah, and I truly think it is. And going back with San Antonio during that short the stint of from '07 to 14, where we're not getting the success of what we want in the playoffs, or at least getting back to the finals, is that unironically, I think they needed to learn how to go into a new offense, because that's when the Greg really starts to do the motion offense. But unironically, every year that San Antonio loses in the playoffs, they go up against that same team the next year and just completely decimate them. So
Yeah.
it's the like building block. It's like, okay, the 2011 Memphis series that I can't stand bringing up as a San Antonio fan. Shout out to the grit and grind Grizzlies, but
Right.
but the very next year, sweep them out. So okay, then we lose. I believe to oh god, who did we lose to in 2012? It was it was the Thunder, and then very next year, get them out in 6 games. Lose to the Heat in the Ray Allen fashion. Completely decimate them in the finals, doing the record margin. So it's like that decimate of, if there's a challenge there, get past them, new challenge ahead, get past them. And that's where I think team building starts to be really important. And if, San Antonio just basically be at the bottom, be a playing team, and then work those challenges the way up. So it's going to be a nice next couple of years, to say the least.
Hopefully. I maybe am different than other people, but I love it when the smaller markets are super competitive and are able to kind of give it to the bigger markets, despite me being a fan of a big market. But I've been a fan so long at this point, I couldn't change my habits anyway. So sadly,
right.
I'm too indebted to the Celtics for the moments that they've given me in my life, the amount of dopamine that they've provided. I am always indebted to the Celtics. So now I want to finish off here a little bit discussing some of the stuff that has been recently talked about. The top 100 list. Your boy Wemby was in the top 10. The list itself, polarizing to say the least. Nonsense, maybe, if you're somebody that really appreciates doing these types of things, but it was all over the place. Do you have anything that you really got from that whole ordeal? Like any real big comments that you would like to make about the top 100 that maybe you kind of got from your first takeaways?
Two things. I think most notably, I think that ESPN, and when I talked about it before, the media is where we all have kind of gripes with the media, and where they try to push these narratives that will be, hope it's more projections than anything else. Well, no, if you're projecting that, Cooper Flag is basically a top 50 player almost without playing an NBA minute, I don't know what you have. But also a very interesting one that I don't think it's gotten talked about a little bit, but Evan Mobley being ranked over Donovan Mitchell.
Right, right there. They were literally, it was what was it? It was like Mitchell, somebody, then Mobley.
It was Anthony Davis, I think.
Oh, okay. Which also,
and I agree. I think that's also bad. But even though on my rankings I have Mitchell over Mobley, they're basically saying that a defensive player of the year is going to have a breakout year, and he's going to be more valuable to the team than their offensive engine. And there's times in NBA history that's definitely happened. And I'm not trying to throw any shade to Mobley, because he's one of my favorite players, but to have that kind of leap again to where the Cavs are in this kind of this struggle bus of being out of the second round because of injuries and stuff that's happened. I disagree with, and it's again that top 50 is very polarizing to get behind, because the evaluation of players, I don't know what their criteria is, and I don't know why players are above the players. Even Joel Embiid, I think the injuries is a big, asterisk towards his career as of late. But having him basically, I think it was 47 is blasphemous to me. Blasphemous.
Yeah, there were quite a few that me, All-American Hooper, and Fluent went through that on NBA Max. Shout out NBA Max. Make sure to check us out on Wednesday nights. And yeah, we found way more. Well, before everything started, I'd say we kind of precipiced it with this whole presupposed this is going to be decent for the most part, but there's going to be a lot of polarizing ones. We couldn't even get to decent for the most part before we got to a lot of polarizing ones. Drew Holiday at 91 to me was polarizing. DeMar DeRozan at 80 was polarizing to me. There's 80 players in this league, 79 players better than DeMar DeRozan. Are there even 70 20-point scorers in the league? I feel like context is lost. The criteria just seems all over the place. And by saying projections, it becomes kind of a cop-out. That being said, the Lakers have 2 top 10 guys, but I feel nobody thinks they're going to win the title. You're a historian guy. I mean, is this an anomaly when a team has 2 top 10 guys and they're not predicted to win?
This is where I have said to people that I don't think LeBron, as of right now, is a top 10 player, because I now live in LA, so I get to watch Lakers and Clippers games, but I try to get Spurs as much as possible. But LeBron, the past 3 years, I've decisively seen him, where I can give credit to is where we all know that he coasts in the regular season, but how he's doing it now, I think, is more blatant than ever, because I'm seeing him be on the weak side and letting Anthony Davis do mid post work. When Luka comes here, he's tasking him to be a PNR guy and helping Jackson Hayes become, better, which obviously didn't happen. But because of the amount of off-ball value that he's bringing up until year 22, that's where people are going to say, well, he's still a top 10 player. And to me, no, because where I evaluate players is that if you're the number one option on teams, and again, I think LeBron is a number 2. I think he's the best number 2. You can be better than number 1s, but all the best players in the league are number 1 options. So I think when a team is not favored to win the title and you have 2 top 10 players, that's kind of an anomaly. I haven't seen that much in NBA history before. I just haven't.
Yeah, that to me was one of the first things I thought when I think Luka was 3 and he was 8, I believe. And it was just fascinating. Okay, so you're saying that they have 2 top 10 guys, but you're also saying you don't predict them to be near the championship. It's just a strange kind of prediction set. Also, the Cavaliers having 2, top 20 guys, the expectations for them, unironically, considering they're another place where LeBron has played, they have a lot of pressure to win the title this year. Big time to me. I think that the window for Cleveland is essentially 1 year, and this has to be that year. Do you agree with that?
I do, and where the projections in the East are, is that they definitely has a possibility of being another 60-win season for them, but it's again that playoff. You know, the lights are too bright. Shout out Jared Allen. Is that when push comes to shove, just things happen, and I think it's a good team on paper. But if they don't get it done this year, you have to blow it up and move on from what I believe your star player in Donovan Mitchell, because you'll get the most value out of him, out of all of that core. So it's boom or bust for them, absolutely.
Yeah, 100%. Now we're getting close to the end of this, so before I have you shout out your places we can locate you and follow you, do you have any bold predictions for this upcoming NBA season? Any predictions maybe no one else is making? Any dark horse thoughts? Anything that you'd like us to know that comes directly from Juelz Compton?
San Antonio is going to be a top 6 seed in the West. I think that they're definitely going to be a playoff team, not a play-in team. I do think that they'll be good enough to make that. And then, unironically, with the Kawhi stuff that's happening and getting updates and trying to steer that as much as possible, keep your eyes out from the Miami Heat, because they have been in links with Kawhi. So if he doesn't get suspended or whatever happens, and he lands himself on the Heat, the Heat are now really good spot. So I have them right now. I think I think either 6th or 7th. They're basically a borderline team. But if you add a Kawhi, what he's giving you in 40 games is just insurmountable. So they'll be able to be afloat up until Kawhi comes in. So I think the Heat for sure are dark horse if they get Kawhi, and San Antonio, because even though we have a whole bunch of question marks, we'll be in contention for sure.
I love that, especially the nice little Miami take, because this Kawhi thing naturally is going to end strangely. I have no idea what the punishment is going to be, because even though the Joe Smith thing existed with them losing 5 picks and 99, like there's really no precedent for what just happened, at least from the outside looking in. I'm not going to say that everybody does this, because I don't necessarily know that, even though we all like to assume probably there's some sort of level to this happening in certain ways that we're all ignorant about. Maybe. But these are the guys that got caught. And at the end of the day, what they decide to do, I think, is a big deal. Because if you just lose first-round picks and nothing else, to me that seems kind of like a slap on the wrist. You mentioned a suspension. Before we get out of here, do you think Kawhi Leonard is going to play a game in the regular season this year?
I do. And my evidence of that is the whole John Morant situation. Even though it's not equal, and I'm not trying to be disingenuous with that. When it comes down to it, the situation at hand, I think, is way more on Ballmer's side of things than a Kawhi, because Kawhi was really, it wasn't even really Kawhi. To go down this rabbit hole really quickly, I know we got to get out of here. Uncle Dennis is the real problem in this, because he was the advocate for Kawhi. So San Antonio Spurs fans have hated that man since 2018 and the whole injury that happened with Kawhi. So Uncle Dennis is, I think, the real problem that won't get any shades of anything. So I do think Kawhi will play this year. It's just if he does get suspended, how many games it will be. But I do think it'll probably be at least half the season, a typical Kawhi year.
I was just going to say that happens. It doesn't even affect Kawhi. You're just giving him load management. I mean, unpaid load management, but
right.
All right, man. This has been great. I thoroughly appreciate having you on here. Where are the best places for us to get your content and follow you? Let us know.
Again, Jules Compton on TikTok. That's my personal page. I host another page on YouTube of We Don't Know Ball podcast. We do a plethora of different sports, and as soon as basketball comes around, I'm going to be way more involved with that. And I have another project coming up with a group of other players and other people, TikTokers, that is in the works of what we're trying to do, almost like a first choice kind of style of things. So when we get that up and running, I'm not entirely sure. Hopefully, it's within the next month because the NBA is right around the corner. But we'll be pushing out content as that as well, and it'll be I won't reveal the name, but we'll be doing our stuff. So that's kind of behind the scenes stuff. But We Don't Know Ball right now, and Jules Compton on TikTok.
Awesome. That is excellent. Hell yeah, my guy. Good stuff as always. Always great to talk to you, man. And for all our fans out there, this was episode 2 of the Creator Hour. We had a great time talking some hoops. Episode 3 will hopefully be filmed shortly. Our next guest is going to be a fun one as well. Hey, have a good one, Jules, and everybody. Have a great rest of your day. This has been Hoop Social, and we are out.